Caitlin Clark has landed a huge win. I mean, if this how the offseason gonna be, bruh, y'all might as well keep y'all bills on. Much news coming out in regards to the sports gambling. The WNBA currently finna be in hot water, allegedly.
For the last 2 seasons, the sports world has been fixated on what looked like a war playing out on the court. Headlines, debates, and social media feeds were dominated by discussions of fouls, cheap shots, and the unusually physical treatment of one player in particular. What should have been a rookie's introduction to the league felt less like fair competition and more like a calculated attempt to dismantle the NBA's newest star. But while the cameras stayed locked on the hardwood, another conflict was unfolding out of sight. This wasn't a battle of elbows and hip checks. It was one fought behind closed doors, in corporate boardrooms. A quiet power struggle, a behind-the-scenes takeover, that has now reached a shocking conclusion. And this story isn't really about basketball at all. This is a story about a financial reckoning. It's about how a rookie everyone assumed was completely exposed was, in reality, backed by a force so powerful it could shake the entire league. The story most people were sold was that Caitlin Clark had been left on her own, abandoned by her agency, ignored by the league. But the truth is, a move was just made. A move so massive it reshaped the balance of power in women's sports. The WNBA thought it was picking a fight with a 23-year-old rookie. What it didn't realize was that it was picking a fight with Wall Street. What followed became a public spectacle, a dominant narrative that consumed the league. From the moment Caitlin Clark was drafted, the on-court treatment was unrelenting. Everyone saw it. What began as so-called "welcome to the league" moments quickly crossed the line from physical defense into something far more personal. Players took shots at her, knocked her down with off-ball contact, and treated her less like a peer and more like a moving target. The reaction was overwhelming. Analysts, fans, and former players all weighed in, each with their own take. But the most startling part wasn't the fouls themselves, it was the silence of the whistles. Referees appeared hesitant to intervene, allowing a level of physicality against Clark that simply wasn't being permitted against anyone else. It was strange. It was frustrating. The league's biggest draw, the player responsible for sellout crowds in arenas nationwide, was being officiated as if she were a nameless rookie, not the star driving the WNBA surge. This created a powerful and dangerous narrative. The league appeared to be failing to protect its most valuable asset. Fans were furious. Many believed the league, the referees, and even opposing players were aligned in a collective effort to humble her. And at the center of that storm, one question grew louder by the day. Where was her protection? Where was her agency? That agency was Excel Sports Management. And the silence from Clark's representation was impossible to ignore. Fans flooded social media, tagging her agent, Erin Kane, demanding that she defend her client. Why wasn't she holding press conferences? Why wasn't she publicly calling out the referees or condemning the league's inaction? Why was she allowing her client to take a beating on national television night after night? The perception hardened quickly. Caitlin Clark had been abandoned. She was a generational asset being actively devalued, and the people meant to protect her were nowhere in sight. That sense of abandonment, the belief that Clark was standing alone, is critical to understanding the real power play unfolding behind the scenes. Because the question wasn't just where Erin Kane was, but what she was actually doing. If she wasn't fighting the referees, what was she fighting for? At the time, the answer seemed baffling. Instead of engaging in the on-court war, Kane was making headlines for discussing the league's collective bargaining agreement. To fans, it felt disconnected, almost absurd. While the public wanted suspensions and fines, Kane was giving interviews to financial publications about the long-term business structure of professional basketball. She openly stated that under the league's current model, Clark would likely never be paid her true market value. To an already frustrated audience, it sounded like surrender. Like an admission that despite Clark's massive economic impact, she was trapped in a system that would never fully compensate her. Then Erin Kane introduced an idea that sounded even more unthinkable. She suggested the WNBA should fully separate from the NBA. Her argument was simple but radical. The league needed to stand on its own to truly unlock its growth and value. At the time, The proposal was brushed off as a negotiation ploy, or worse, a complete distraction. To the public, it looked like an agent hopelessly disconnected from the moment. Her client was taking punishment on the court, and she was talking about corporate restructuring. That perceived disconnect only deepened the belief that Clark was fighting alone. Fans and analysts were left stunned, convinced her team had failed her entirely. But they were wrong. They weren't just focused on the wrong battlefield, they were fighting the wrong war altogether. What almost no one noticed, and what the sports media failed to connect, was a critical relationship that already existed. Caitlin Clark wasn't simply another athlete represented by an agency. She was already a strategic partner of one of the most powerful financial institutions in the world, Goldman Sachs. And this wasn't some last-minute reaction to the WNBA. The partnership predated her professional career entirely. You have to go back to 2023, before Clark was even drafted. This wasn't a basic nil deal or a quick endorsement photo op. Clark was personally selected by Goldman Sachs to serve as the face of its national 10,000 Small Businesses Voices campaign, a role that placed her not just in sports marketing, but in the center of corporate and political influence. This was a completely different universe from a typical sports sponsorship. Caitlin Clark wasn't just endorsing a brand, she was advocating for federal policy. Goldman Sachs used her platform and public image to lobby Washington, D.C., pushing for changes to federal law aimed at supporting small businesses. A global financial powerhouse doesn't hand that kind of responsibility to just anyone. They don't place their reputation in the hands of a college athlete without exhaustive vetting. Goldman Sachs trusted her. Long before she ever stepped onto a WNBA court, they viewed Clark as credible, influential, and strategically valuable. That hidden partnership, this deep-rooted connection to one of the most powerful institutions in global finance, was the twist no one anticipated. The supposedly unprotected rookie wasn't an outsider at all. She was already inside the system. And then the move happened. While the WNBA season was consumed by controversy, while analysts argued over flagrant fouls and officiating, a financial shockwave hit. Reports emerged that Goldman Sachs was nearing the completion of a massive acquisition. This wasn't a passive investment in sports. They were securing a controlling stake in Excel Sports Management. The valuation was jaw-dropping, placing the agency at close to $1 billion. This wasn't a side bet or a symbolic partnership. It was a decisive power move. This was a Wall Street giant making a definitive billion-dollar statement, planting its flag firmly in the sports world. And when details of the acquisition became public, the justification was clear: the client list. The agency represented icons like Tiger Woods and Derek Jeter, but listed alongside them as a central asset was Caitlin Clark. That wasn't accidental. It was the entire point. This deal wasn't about legacy stars or past achievements. It was a bet on the future, a direct purchase of the Caitlin Clark economy. Consider the implications. The same financial powerhouse Clark was already partnered with had just spent nearly $1 billion to acquire the agency that controls her contract. This wasn't a bailout or a defensive move. It was a deliberate consolidation of power. Goldman Sachs didn't simply deepen its relationship with Clark. It effectively positioned itself above her representation. Not just a partner, but the ultimate authority in the chain. Now connect the dots. Why would a firm that manages trillions of dollars invest $1 billion into a sports agency? Not for a retiring Tiger Woods. Not for yesterday's legends. They did it for the golden goose. They bought the agency that controls the single most valuable, fastest-growing asset in all of women's sports. This move wasn't symbolic, it was strategic. A calculated acquisition designed to own, control, and, above all, protect the asset. Suddenly, Erin Kane's silence made perfect sense. What once looked like a baffling absence now reads as a master plan coming into focus. She wasn't overlooking the cheap shots. She was negotiating a $1 billion deal. There was no need to fight the WNBA in the press. Kane was busy bringing a force so powerful it could buy the entire table. And with that, the narrative flips completely. Erin Kane didn't fail to protect Caitlin Clark. She executed one of the most consequential power moves in modern sports. She brought Clark's existing partners straight to the head of the table. The response wasn't loud or emotional. There was no fiery press conference. No formal grievance filed with the league. The retaliation was quiet, precise, and devastating. A billion-dollar merger that permanently altered the balance of power. Clark's team didn't just answer the threat. They erased it by reshaping the entire structure around it. This is the real ending, the part that should have the WNBA and its leadership deeply unsettled. Commissioner Kathy Engelbert and the team owners are no longer dealing with a rookie they can marginalize. They're no longer dealing with an agent they can dismiss. For all practical purposes, they are now dealing directly with Goldman Sachs. Let that reality settle in. Any on-court action that harms the asset is no longer just a foul call or a sports controversy. It becomes a direct risk to a billion-dollar investment held by one of the most powerful financial institutions on the planet. That changes everything. The league's internal politics, the resentment from veteran players, the permissive officiating, all of it just collided head-on with a global financial titan. This is Caitlin Clark's real revenge. It wasn't delivered through a hard foul or a viral complaint. It was executed in silence, in boardrooms, and it rewrote the game entirely.